As Jonathan watched, a man came out of the tavern, someone he had never seen before. He was a large man with broad shoulders and a red, badly pock-marked face. His shirt, spilling out of his trousers, wasn't very clean, and his dark green jacket with fraying cuffs was clearly odd. His boots were caked with mud. His hat was too small. When the man came out of the tavern, he was holding a tankard with one hand, wiping crumbs from his mouth with the other. He stood in front of the tavern door, surveying the gathered men who, in turn, kept keen eyes on him. "Any more coming?" the stranger called. "Be some time yet," came the reply. "We don't have time," the stranger snapped. He took a half step around, as if to go back inside. The tavern keeper stood in the doorway. "By God," the stranger said, "don't they understand? If we don't move, they'll get through." The tavern keeper said nothing at all. A man came running, cresting the hill. A gun was in his hand. "Where are they coming from?" he called. "Pennington way," called one of the men. "How many?" 15 or less. "Who saw them?" "The corporal's come." Again he turned to the stranger. He was finishing off his drink. When done, he handed the tankard to the keeper, who took it silently. "Here's more!" cried the man in the tree. "You be patient, corporal," he called to the stranger. "You'll have an army yet." The tavern keeper shook his head. "It's groundbreaking time." The corporal strode down from the doorway and approached the men. "How long will it take marching troops to get here from Linville?" he asked. "That's 4 miles," came an answer. "An hour and a half," was the calculation. Impatiently, the stranger rubbed his hands together, then suddenly swung around to face the bell, where Jonathan was standing, watching. "That's enough!" the corporal barked to Jonathan's friend. "They'll either come or not." The boy let the rope drop. Again the stranger considered the group of men, then, turning, discovered Jonathan's eyes fixed on him. "You handle a gun?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Jonathan managed to get out. "And you?" the stranger asked the other boy. The boy shook his head no. The corporal glowered, then shifted around once more and drifted towards the men. 4 more had run in, making 13 in all. The corporal appraised them, then turned to the tavern keeper. "You coming?" he asked. "We'll need to have ourselves a second line in case they get through," said the innkeeper. "I'd best stick here." The corporal frowned, and then, lost in thought, went to his horse and tightened up the saddle. Only then did it occur to Jonathan that this corporal, whoever he was, had ridden in with the news. He wondered where he had come from, and just what he had seen, and why he'd come to this place. When he finished fussing with his horse, the corporal swung around to face the waiting men. "There's no more time," he said. "We need to go." Jonathan noticed that the men were now watching one another as much as they watched the stranger. "Aren't we going to wait for more?" came the question. "It's late," the corporal replied. "Yes or no? Are we going?" No one spoke. Then someone Jonathan didn't see gave a murmur. Others took it up, a brief swelling sound, not quite a word. "All right," the corporal said, choosing to take the sound as yes. He looked about again, his eyes coming to rest on Jonathan. "You," he said, pointing, "you said you could shoot. Get a musket from the tavern. You're needed." 11:30. His pride soaring, Jonathan grinned at his friend, who was looking at him with astonishment. Then Jonathan turned toward the tavern keeper, who was standing by the door. "Going, are you?" the tavern keeper said before Jonathan could speak. "Yes, sir." "Got asked special, did you?" Jonathan nodded yes. "What's your father to say?" "Told me to come." "Did he?" Jonathan didn't say. "And now," said the tavern keeper, "our blessed corporal asks to borrow a gun." "I can use it." "Hope you can," said the tavern keeper. He moved inside, saying, "Come on." Jonathan bounded up the steps. It was dark inside. The wooden floorboards, shiny from heavy use, glowed with dark brown warmth. The rank smell of ale and cider thickened the air. Waiting just inside the door, Jonathan kept his eyes on the far end of the large, dim room, where the white glow of the keeper's shirt moved behind the grill. Within moments, the man emerged from the dark, a gun in his hand. It was a flintlock musket, almost 6 feet long, butt and stock of polished wood. Jonathan saw that it was older than his father's gun, but to him it was nothing less than beautiful. Reaching out with one hand, he put his fingers around the cold metal barrel. It was unexpectedly heavy. He had to thrust out his other hand to keep it up. Holding it tightly, he brought the gun close to his chest, then let it swing down until the butt rested on the floor. The gun reached above his head. "Manage?" the tavern keeper asked. "Yes, sir," said Jonathan. "Sure, I can." "It's 12 pounds of weight." Jonathan studied the gun. From its topmost ramrod to its shiny hammer lock to its bottom butt plate. Knowing the gun was his to use, he felt a deep glow inside. "Have I got your word of honor you'll bring it back?" "Yes, sir." "Your honor as a man?" "Yes, sir." The tavern keeper strung a cartridge pouch around the boy's neck. 30 cartridges, he whispered. "Wrapped them myself. Here's your powder." He added the powder horn. "Any extra flint?" Jonathan asked, waiting to show he understood what he was about. "What I've got to spare is on the gun." The tavern keeper kept studying Jonathan, measuring him. "Look here," he finally said, "you don't have to go. You can leave all this and get on out through the back. No one's gonna know or care. Not that man. Just because he's tapped you doesn't mean you have to go. He likes telling folks what to do." Jonathan, not even wanting to hear the words, looked down. He fingered the gun nervously. "You know much about him?" the tavern keeper asked. Jonathan shook his head no. The tavern keeper considered. Then he sighed. "You take care of yourself," he said. For a moment, Jonathan remained standing there, not knowing what to say. "Get on, then, if you're going," said the man with a wave of his gun. "Get!" Jonathan turned, inadvertently smashing the gun butt against the door frame. The shock made him almost drop the gun. Recovering, he hastened outside into the light. The men had already begun to move south along Pennington Road. The corporal, astride his horse, was rounding past the bend. Jonathan looked about. Behind him, from the building's darkness, the tavern keeper watched, while in front his friend sat on the bell rack frame, hands to either side. He too was watching. Grasping the gun tightly in both hands, Jonathan jumped down the steps and ran down the road towards Pennington.